Welcome to the From Concealment Podcast, the show for firearm enthusiasts who like to shoot, train, carry, and compete. Get ready for some shooting and sight, firearm and accessory reviews, and of course, insight on concealed carry. And now, broadcasting from behind enemy lines in the From Concealment studio, it's Pete Mitchell and Dan Sams.
Hey, Freedom Nation, this is Pete Mitchell.
And I'm Dan Sams.
And we're back after having a short little hiatus due to, let's just say, COVID-related incidences. Because everything's COVID-related.
Well,
I mean, that's an excuse for everything.
My car's battery got COVID suddenly when the temperature dropped and died. And
I got to file my taxes, but I got COVID. So, I need 2 extra weeks.
I didn't even think about using that one. That's a really good one. Yeah.
I mean, I got COVID. Just say COVID.
Yeah, man. I like it.
It's the excuse for everything.
We haven't been thinking through how to use this whole thing to our advantage. We really should be thinking about COVID trauma. I was actually talking to a guy in our church last night who was in this psych class that was taught by this lefty. And she was talking about, well, you do what you do because your parents have influenced you, and everything is kind of your parents' fault and society's fault. So he's like, there's a lot going on. I got a family, and I ended up not doing very well in the class. And he said, I was in danger of failing. And so he actually told her, he's like, well, how dare you fail me when you know this is I'm just the product of my upbringing and blah, blah, blah. And she said, you got a point there, and gave him a C.
What?
It worked. He's like, and I'm like, and this is in a psych class. So I'm like, so you used like a weird kind of reverse psychology. And he's like, yep, I pretty much just turned the lefty narrative on them. And here we go. That was hilarious. I was like, well done, sir.
Wow.
Oh yeah. It was sad and hilarious at the same time, which is kind of the thing with so many things going on.
Yeah. No, it's I don't know what it's like out there in free America, because I live behind enemy lines here and for our drinking buddies in California.
Yeah.
And so back on December 15th, our governor instituted another statewide mask mandate, saying you have to wear a mask through January 15th. Which my wife and I were both saying he's never met a mandate he didn't extend. And of course, it's not like the masks helped, because COVID cases are through the roof, which also points out that it's not like the vaccine helps, because COVID cases are higher now than they've ever been. Yeah. And we have the vaccine. So he extended it through February 15th. Now, in Orange County, where I live, I can still walk into stores without a mask, because they're just done fighting you. I'm usually one of the only people in there without a mask. Costco, on the other hand, will hunt you down and throw you to the ground, put the mask on your head, and duct tape it to you. So they're one of the few stores that are like, you have to wear a mask.
Costco's hardcore.
Costco, it's freaking Union. I mean, what do you expect? Yeah. It's blue, So of course they're for the mask. And so we knew it was going to get extended. It gets extended to February 15th. Now, understand this. I am trying desperately to move out of California.
Yeah.
And I would say I'm at this point 95% sure I'm going to get to move.
All right.
It's not 100%. It'll never be 100% until I freaking pack the car and get in it and start driving. Then I know it's happening for real. So I do happen to read articles so I can point out how absurd California is to my wife. I need her to keep seeing, no, it's not going to get better in this state. It's going to keep getting worse. So our esteemed governor, he of course pushes it out to February 15th, which helps me, because my wife loathes the mask, absolutely loathes the mask. She works in LA County, which is far worse than Orange County. And they came out with the rule last week, going into effect today, that every employee has to wear an N95 mask.
Oh, dear.
or a KN95 mask. And of course, this just sends my wife over the edge because she's got these fake masks that still don't help her, but like they're mesh and they're sparkly. So you can't necessarily see unless you're up on her that it's just mesh and she can actually breathe through it. But now she can't wear those because of the LA County thing when she's at work. And so she is so livid. Now, you got to understand my wife. I don't know that I've ever heard my wife cuss in our entire lives. And in one conversation, she drops the F-bomb twice. And I'm like, yes, I am getting out of the state. It's happening. I am going. Like, I am just so thrilled.
Oh, that's awesome.
And then it turns out that unfortunately it wasn't just LA County. Then California mandated everyone's got to wear the N95 masks. So, which does help me again with, hey, you know what? We got to get the heck out of here. Because you were thinking maybe you transferred to one of the Orange County ice rinks and that way you didn't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really seem to matter. It's going to be everywhere that we got to deal with this crap. So, yeah, I tell you, man, this state is just a giant joke. And then I'm reading your book recommendation, listening to it on Audible, going home. Which, by the way, you should have at least given me the heads up. Hey, there's a little bit of profanity in this book.
I thought I did. I'm sorry.
With kids in the car, I'm like, mute that sucker, mute it.
Yeah, you don't want to be listening to that for kids in the car, not just for the language, but for some
stuff,
really dark stuff that's going on. Yeah.
I'm about halfway through the book. It's really good. I like those kind of books.
Yeah,
that's why now I'm like, now I need night vision. I need to rethink my loadout that I got.
Same here, man. So my loadout is it's a 3-day get home. It's not designed for me if I'm out on the road. He had a different kind of loadout in part because like he's far from home. Side note, everybody, we're talking about the book Going Home by A American. There's a whole series. I want to say there's 8 books, by the way. I've gotten through 5 of them. And
really?
They are wonderful. Every one of them is good. Every one of them keeps my attention, and they all kind of have a different focus. Like obviously Going Home is about him getting home after this EMP attack. Then you have, Surviving Home, and, he's home and there's all this stuff going on and dealing with people in the community losing their minds. And so like every little book is moving along, and it actually is kind of hopeful because it comes around and it's like, here's what it might look like for society to be rebuilt. I think, you're going to love it. It's so good. I'm thinking about, okay, when I get to Texas, here's where I'm building out my hidden storage facility, which is going to have, I'm thinking now I need to have somewhere in the range of 25 to 30,000 rounds in there, maybe 10,000 9, 10,000 223. Yep. Another 5 to 10 in 45. Because if you got a 9 and a 45, you've got your bases covered. And that's the majority of my firearms outside of the rifles, of course. Yep.
And then I'm thinking, how much food do I need to store? Like my head is just full on what happens when this thing hits because the thought going through my head is where I'm at in his Going Home book. He's traveling home. Like you said, it's mostly rural. He comes across, town after town, but it's mostly rural. And I'm sitting there going, what's this going to look like? Because I live in suburbs. I basically live in Peopleville. There's people everywhere. And that's going to be crazy if we hit that kind of a scenario. Cause there's going to be gang after gang. Like it's going to be, we control this block. We control that block. We control that one.
Yep.
It's not going to be pretty.
That's why the importance of getting involved with a local Minuteman group is a pretty important thing. Minuteman group is just your good, faithful neighbors who you've talked it through. And if something goes down, here's how you're going to help each other out. Because, even 5 to 10 guys with a reasonable loadout could prevent a whole lot of bad things from happening. And even 3 or 4 guys with guns who are up to no good could cause a lot of problems for anybody without a plan on how to respond. And so, yeah, find your local Minuteman group. You can actually go on Instagram and search Minuteman in your state, and you'd be surprised. Now, I'm sure some of them are feds, but the Minuteman movement is very clear to be like, hey, we don't want to do anything illegal. We're just here to help each other out if the police can't get here. Worth checking out, man. Check out your Minuteman concept, your Minuteman group, because we're going to need it. So, but I'm excited about what you got planned, man. Once you get to good old Texas, your wife cussing her way out of
Dude,
California, man.
I'm so hopeful.
Well, and there's so many bonkers things going on in California. Did you see the Yahoo article where I was gonna cite the train one because that's just bonkers anyway. I mean, they're just raiding trains like it's the Old West. Worse than if it's the Old West, right? No, there's somebody that wrote an article, and I think it's in the Ventura Star, if I'm understanding it right. And they're essentially saying that California should abolish parenthood in the name of.
Oh yeah.
And
it was an article, and it was obviously some idiot.
Yeah. Well, what was funny to me is as you're looking at it, I think Not the Bee wrote something about it, and they're like, we're hoping this is satire because it's so bonkers. But if it's satire, it's not very well done. I think this person's serious. They're even, far out there even for California. But the fact that people say things like that, there are people who not only think that, but they can get a platform in a local newspaper to write about it. Like, there's some pretty significant lefty stuff going on there to allow that. Man, what a mess. So
yeah. Welcome to California.
Yeah, dude. Yeah. We got to get you out of there, man. So yeah, everybody, you need to be reading the Going Home series by A. American. I honestly read every one I could get the audio of, within like a week. I mean, 10 days, and I'd read 5 books on this thing. So good. And so I just started the book 1 second after. And hold on, I need to remember the name of the author. The same kind of concept. 1 Second After by William R. Fortune. And interestingly enough, Newt Gingrich writes the foreword. And this maybe puts up a yellow flag a little bit on a couple of these things, but the guy who wrote it essentially was involved with some military things. He had some DC connections, and there were some lectures going on where the military was just essentially going to executive branch back in the 90s and saying, like, this is our biggest vulnerability. If there was an EMP related attack, we would be screwed. Like, we got to do something about this. And if I'm reading through between the lines a little bit, his concern, well, not just, in the foreword, they talk about that people weren't taking this threat seriously. And so he wrote this fictional book intentionally to draw attention to what could happen. And put aside even EMP, what a solar flare could do, and we'd be in trouble. But EMP especially, like, we know that there's development in that technology, and man, they could just cripple us. So yeah, get yourself a Faraday bag, hide your most important stuff in it, radio and whatever survival related stuff that is electronic. But yeah, 1 Second After is turning out to be not quite as good as the Going Home series, but pretty doggone good.
Nice.
So yeah. So want to talk about a few things related. We didn't get to talk about January 6th stuff, and I think it might be worth just kind of talking about what's happening related to that. I don't know. Did you have any thoughts on anything else before we jump into that, Pete?
No, go for it. Jump away. All
right. So I think you all know, we've taken the stand for the most part on here that the January 6th riot was not a good thing. It wasn't wise. It wasn't handled properly. There's a whole lot of things that and I would say on all sides, like, it was a big mess. So don't take this as us approving mobbing the Capitol. I've made some stronger statements than that in the past that I still stand by, but what we're essentially saying is, it wasn't the wisest thing. But here's what's interesting to me. We're seeing a lot of just sketch stuff about January 6th. Even when it was going down, you had some video where there are police letting people in. We had other video where people were breaking windows. You have a lot of like different things happening, not just conflicting stories, but I would argue different things happening. You had people that were supposedly reporting against the rioters, and they were there to just expose them, that were going right along with them. And it's like, well, were you there to help, or were you there because you were trying to expose them? Like, which is it? Like, it's a lot of just shady stuff. But we have video of some guys, probably the same guy, who was kind of instigating the crowd and making some comments, trying to move this thing along to
I remember that. Yeah.
Right. And so it was so overt that there are sections of the video where people start jeering and saying "Fed, Fed, Fed," like, which that's the rule of thumb, is anytime you got a group of guys together that like guns or like freedom, when a new guy shows up and says, let's do this radical thing, the chances are that dude's a Fed. Like, I mean, almost universally, you should just assume that's a Fed and don't go along with that. Right. For a lot of reasons, don't go along with that. And so anyway, I don't know if you all saw, there was about a week ago, I think it was last week, Senator Ted Cruz was interviewing in like this congressional hearing, one of the big brass at the FBI. And he cites that video, and because they even had the guy's name.
Right. They knew who he was.
And he says, hey, and he starts asking these questions. Was the FBI involved in the January 6th, riot? And she's like, I can't answer that question, which, by the way, if they just flat weren't, they should be like, oh, absolutely not. Right. Yeah. Like, why would you need to say, I can't answer that question? Shouldn't it just be a flat, oh, absolutely. We would never do that. Like, that's just absolutely not. So then he starts asking, they're like, he notes that there are people from the various videos that are being prosecuted right now. And he cites this guy's, because they had this guy's name. And they said, is he a federal officer? And she's like, I can't answer that. And I forget the guy's name. I'm sorry. I'm not looking at it right now. And they're like, okay, well then we have video of him instigating, right? We have all this stuff going on. Why is and we have his name. So why isn't the FBI investigating him? Why is he not on any of these lists of investigation? Like, if we got all these other people, we got this guy's name, we got his picture, we've got all this information about him. So why aren't you prosecuting him? And then they're like, I can't answer that, sir. And I'm like, and so, I mean, it's just pretty clear that homeboy was a Fed, yeah, right? Like, and like in a congressional hearing, he's pretty well cross-examining her and exposing this. So he's like, were there federal officers involved in, violence on blah, blah, blah. And he's asking, and she just said, I can't answer that. I tell you what, that Not the Bee has an article on it. Let's find it really quick. Not the Bee cited it, but you could find the video. I don't know if it was on C-SPAN or anything like that, but check it out. Check out Ted Cruz interviews FBI. I don't think it was the director. I think it was just one of the top brass, but man, so you see that kind of thing going on. And then I don't know if you were noticing that the left is acting like this was the biggest thing ever. We've heard like all these things, like this was like another 9/11. And it's like, come on, man.
Yeah. It's such a joke.
And
our cities to the ground.
Oh my goodness.
You got pushed out of your office for a few hours.
Yeah. And
insane.
And I'm just gonna go on record and say I don't approve of what was done, but I gotta tell you, to see politicians cowering in fear, I think is not a bad thing. And there was something about like, okay, so you guys are afraid. You need to remember that like this is a government of the people, by the people, for the people. And I don't condone that approach, but man, you better sober up a little bit. No, I don't think they have. I think they've gotten more power hungry, because the way that wicked tyrants handle anything that is different than they're comfortable with is to clamp down even harder. Yeah. And that's what we saw. So anyway, I think it's just worth acknowledging. And my experience, and when I'm talking to people, is that they're relatively ignorant of the things that went on. And I would say on both sides. And I start talking a little bit. And in the early stages, when some of us are seeing these videos of like, well, they're letting them in. And then you see other video where it's like, okay, well, they were pushing past barriers. There was certainly some not good, it wasn't all just letting everybody in. But there's a whole lot of weird, funny stuff. If you get the chance, watch the HBO documentary about it. Of course, it leans left, but you get to hear from both sides a little bit. One of the intriguing things to me was the Capitol police officer that they pulled out of the line and started tasing it. And he thought he was going to die. And so he just yelled out, "I have kids." And they're like, "Oh, okay." Picked him up and threw him back over the line. Whole thing is interesting. And I think just worth paying attention that the evidence is out there that the feds instigated this. I mean, the evidence is pretty strong for that they were at least involved in this. And so then my question would be like, why would they want to do that? And I don't know if you guys ever listen, some of you guys might listen to Doug Wilson, and with all these weird things that our government's doing, that's just awful. His line has been, don't take the bait. What they want to do. So like you had the January 6th thing happens, and what do? I mean, they make DC look like North Korea. And so he's like, that's what they wanted to do. Right. And it also allowed them to dissuade every bit of attention from real questions related to the election to now, see what they did, those meanies. And so the message here is, don't take the bait. Don't go and do something stupid, man. Yeah, because chances are they want it.
I put in our Telegram group, which, by the way, you also join.
Yes. It's straight fire, man.
What is
I love
Telegram?
it.
I can't even remember the number. It'll be in the show notes. I get too many dang numbers in my head. But so my old college housemate, he goes by the pseudonym Mark Owen. Wrote that book, No Easy Day, the firsthand account of the mission that got bin Laden. And he just did a 4-part interview on Jack Carr's Danger Close podcast. Phenomenal podcast. 4 episodes. I hadn't listened to anything else from Jack Carr. I'm sure it's great. But I just want to listen because he's my old buddy from college, right? So I wanted to hear it. And they talk about how when they had bin Laden in the mountains and they knew where he was, the military was like, well, we don't want to have a bigger footprint. So they wouldn't send in any more troops. And they contrasted that. I want to say there was like 2,500 troops, of which 100 were special forces. And they contrasted that to, January 6th, which was like, we're putting, or maybe it was inauguration where they put 25,000 troops in DC. No one seemed to care about the footprint then, and they go through all these different scenarios where it's like 10,000, 25,000, 30,000 troops. Yet when we had bin Laden, we knew where he was, and we don't want a bigger footprint.
Yeah.
Like,
well, when he's on the CIA payroll, I'm sure there was some agreements.
He was at one time.
He was at one time. I don't think he was at that time, but I always like to remind everybody, like, he worked for us for a while.
Yeah. Who do you think funded him? I mean, trained him, all that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a shady mess, but which tells you like, well, why would we want to let him get away? Well, I know we don't know why that the footprint became the issue for catching the most wanted man in the world, that like, we don't want too many guys there. Like, that's bull crap. We don't know it's bull crap.
Invade Iraq.
Right. Exactly.
Which had nothing to do with 9/11.
So think about though, what allowed them to do, not us, allowed them to do is, do some fighting and it's smoke and mirrors. It's like, well, pay no attention to that man behind the mountain.
And then Afghanistan became the longest running war in U.S. history, but we don't want to have a big footprint.
Yes. Isn't that strange? Like, sometimes I just like sit back and be like, so none of this makes sense, right? It just doesn't. Like, just flatly, it doesn't make sense. So then the question is this incompetence or a conspiracy?
Right.
And it almost doesn't matter which it is. It's evil and it's wrong. And you shouldn't want these people in charge of your life. Like, these are the people that tax you. These are the people that force you to pay for their government schools, or they'll take your house away. Like, it's not cool. Let's just be reminded that, like, these are not good people. They're either so radically incompetent that they shouldn't have anything to do with anything, or they're so devious and insidious in their effort. And either way, we shouldn't see this as a good thing. That's just bad dudes. Yeah. So anyway, I thought it was just worth, and you're exactly right now then, but when it's when it's an attack with hardly any firearms or anything. We know a couple of people had firearms, but somehow then they're happy to put thousands and thousands of troops deployed in our own country.
Right.
Which tells us, like, we are more of an enemy to them than Osama bin Laden was.
Yeah. That's kind of what it comes down to.
I mean, it comes down to that. I mean, that is just what the evidence shows us. So anyway, that's going on. I've got a couple of happy things to talk about too, but I don't know. Do you have anything else on your mind? Oh, I had one more thing. I'm sorry, Pete. It's not related to January 6th though, but did you have anything?
No, go for it. Go for it.
All right. So I just want to draw attention just because I mean, partially fun, partially, I think Pete and I want to just be able to say, at least I want to say, like, I told you so. But like, you guys might remember, if you've been listening for a long time, back in, like, I want to say like 2019, like around Thanksgiving time, we were following the Hong Kong protesters, or at least I was following a couple of the, like, you know, accounts that not everybody was following, we'll just say. But it's Hong Kong protesters, and they started reporting not just on Hong Kong, but on, hey, do you guys see what's going on in Wuhan? And so there was video coming out of Wuhan of people being sick and everything being clamped down. And I think we probably mentioned it in passing a couple of times. And there were a few people, interestingly enough, there were a few early on conspiracy dudes that were starting to wear masks early, and they're like, something's going down, it's going to get here. And I'm just like, dude, let's just chill. Let's not freak out to that level. But I think sometimes people forget there were a few conspiracy theorists that were most concerned with the virus early on, right? And then they were called conspiracy theorists, of course, because they're like, whatever, I'm sure we can trust China. Not a big deal. They said nothing's going on. And then, of course, more came here. And one of the first things early on, we're like, man, it's weird. If there's a Wuhan lab, and it came out of Wuhan, and they studied these kind of viruses there, I mean, like, that's suspicious. Shouldn't somebody look into that? And everybody's like, shut up, you're a conspiracy theorist, whatever. Well, now, if you guys were following the Project Veritas stuff that's come out, we know the DARPA documents that were supposedly on some kind of a top secret file, but they have been confirmed even by Fauci to be legit documents. Right. I mean, in congressional hearings, these documents have been acknowledged. So we're not talking about forged documents. We're not talking about some conspiracy theorist that made something up. And so as that's come out now, all of a sudden there's been a lot more discussion on, like, when Rand Paul interviewed Fauci back, I don't remember how long ago, related to the gain of function research, and pretty well caught him in the lie there. But people treat Fauci like he is some kind of pontiff, like he's almost like deified.
I know.
And so it's like, just like the Pope gets to say contradictory things and lie and be awful, so does he. And not to just give a jab to our papal people, but sorry, guys. I'm not that sorry. Anyway. Anyway, so all that's going on. Well, then now these documents reveal that, like, okay, so he lied. We've got government documents. We found some emails after the fact, but government documents that are acknowledging this. And he was essentially warned through these documents indicate that, like, he was warned about the gain of function research and carried on with it anyway. Now he's trying to deny some stuff, but what it's exposing is several different things related to, like, the origin of the virus. It was very clear that early on, they acknowledged that it very likely came out of the lab. In fact, they were citing specific tests that were going on related to this. And it was like, I mean, it just has to be this. interestingly enough, there was a little bit about treatment and some of the treatments that have been seen as oh, you conspiracy theorists think that's okay, and yet in it they cite those treatments, right? Yeah. Ivermectin, and they might even mention hydroxychloroquine. And it's like, and like I think it was hydroxy that somebody came across like on accident, right? Like during treatment. But then this, I mean, shows. So then you think about like they had knowledge on how to treat it, and not only did they withhold that information, but when somebody else came along and said, hey, this seems to be working, they tried to shut that down. Right. And so we start talking about all of this that was going on. Well, then not big, this is less big, but more interesting. There were emails between, and I think it was between Fauci and it was Dr. Collins from, he was director of NIH. They're essentially going back and forth. I mean, there's a variety of emails, but one of the comments was like, well, if somebody finds out that this likely came out of the lab, that's going to hurt, science research later on. And so we can't let this get out. And so it's essentially like, we got to make some sacrifices for the greater good. So rather than tell people, here's how you would treat this, here's what would make it better, here's who's responsible, here's how we could handle this, they shut it down because they were scared that they would lose the ability to do that research again. And this is emails between, like, from NIH director, emails from Fauci. This is not some conspiracy theory. This is raw data that shows that there was indeed a conspiracy to cover up both the origin and the treatment of the virus. That should, I mean, if that doesn't make people want to riot, like, what in the world? And people, of course, keep going on, and like they're so used to just doing what they're told that like they don't care. They're like, oh, I mean, some of us care, but anyway, worth checking out the Project Veritas stuff. There's a Not the Bee article where they cite some of the email leaks that I don't even think came through Project Veritas, but anyway, just worth noting, some of the things we were saying in, like, I don't know, that was probably 2019. It was before it was even blowing up. We were right. So listen to Dan and Pete, you guys. It's all for your good.
Yeah, no, it's amazing how much people will just, out of fear, they're okay with the tyranny that's come down. I mean, I still remember a conversation with my dad, and he said, and I quote, well, when 700,000 people have died, you have to change how things are done. And I'm like, no, you can give up your freedoms if you want. You don't get to take away mine because of your fear. Yeah. And yes, 700,000 people, it's awful. But at the same time, people die every day. And I know no one wants to hear that. But that's kind of like called life. I mean, life has this natural conclusion called death. Yeah. We all going to die. It's going to happen to every one of us. Mm-hmm. Now, if this was Ebola and it had a 98% kill rate, I got to be honest with you, I don't know how I would feel, but I can tell you this. I don't know where the line is, but I know it's not with a 98, 99% survival rate. I know it's not there. Yeah. I don't know where it is, but I know it's not there.
No, it's not that. Yep. Well, and then the funny thing is, we did have some Ebola issues not that long ago. When was that? 2017, when there was not in the US, right?
Yeah.
Like in Africa, there was a pretty big Ebola thing, and like people were dying, and it was scary, and like it was pretty close to a death sentence. And I mean, it wasn't like we were like, oh, let's block anybody coming from that African countries, and like there was no the concern over that very real high death rate disease didn't even touch this, right? Just strange, just really, really strange. So anyway, yeah, some days it just frustrates me. And so I
kind of wonder what's going to happen over the next 15, 20 years. Because now they're talking that 2024, we're going to see Hillary run for president.
Yeah. Well, and now that they've rigged elections, she could win.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. It's like they've got it nailed down to a science at this point. So who do they want to be president? Yeah.
I mean, I'm not even sure. I mean, I'm going to vote. I'm not sure it's going to do anything.
Right.
I mean, I guess it maybe mitigates, all the false ones that they're doing. At least I cut out one of those, but I don't think it matters anymore, man. And that's a really heavy thing to say, but I think that's where we're at, man.
It's unfortunate, but yeah.
Yeah. So I'm investing in other means of voting.
Other means of voting? I don't even know what that means.
The old-fashioned way to I can't say it on here, Pete. Yeah.
Yep.
We're gonna
keep in mind the 3 G's, everybody.
Yeah.
God, gold, and Guinness.
Yeah. I am also listening to Going Home, and then actually it was in Staying Home where you learn a little bit about his home prepping kind of plan, and definitely has got me thinking about I'd like to do a little bit more in the way of prep. And it's always interesting when like my military friends and my guys that have been, in the intelligence community, when they're like buying more from Patriot Supply, like, and they're like, that's when I'm I can kind of watch them as like a barometer. Like
right.
The guy who was in military intelligence and like suddenly leaves it and like builds a bunker out in the middle of nowhere. That's a warning sign. I mean, like canary in a cage, man. So yeah. So now I've got to balance that with my wife is like, why are you getting all this rice and beans that we're never going to use? It's just going to rot down there. And I'm like, I hope we don't have to use it, but we probably go.
No, you just got to cycle through it.
Yeah.
You just got to start working in those meals and you eat the old stuff and then you buy a new one to supplant the old one.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. I totally agree. What's funny though, we eat pretty lean and healthy, right? My survival storage, I am intentionally storing like some higher starch, some protein, but some higher calorie stuff that like my day-to-day life, I'm not normally going to eat. Now, I don't mind eating it. I like it, but the type of food I'm storing for an emergency is a higher calorie, higher density food. Like it's just not as healthy unless you're trying to survive. You know what I mean? So yes, I can do that though. Like it's all right. And a lot of these like rice, beans, I'm looking at getting some Mylar bags and more 5-gallon buckets. And so essentially put 30 days worth of food in a 5-gallon bucket, 30 days probably for my family actually, in a 5-gallon bucket, oxygen absorber, seal it in the Mylar bag, seal it in there, and not virtually indefinitely we could have that last. So
right, not even think about it.
Yeah. So it's good stuff, man. So how are we on time, man? Oh man, we're almost out of it. Was there anything else? Oh, did you have anything else, Pete?
I'm good.
Talking
I'm good today. I'm good just to be a participant in this one today.
Oh, this is good fun. Well, I'll just remind everybody, check out the Project Veritas DARPA stuff. Just by the way, you should probably get on the Telegram feed for Project Veritas. Worth following them because, they just share the raw data, and I know they're hated, but
they have won every court case they've been involved in.
I was thinking about mentioning that. That should tell you something.
Every time someone has slandered them or said they put out false information, they've sued. They've won every single one of them. That really does tell you a lot about them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I think they've had like 360 court cases. So, I mean, we're not talking small. It's like massive.
I didn't realize that was that many.
It was a lot. Yeah.
Oh, so a couple of quick, we'll call these product reviews. One, some of you guys have seen my Obey God, Defy Tyrants sticker that I have on my mug. I don't have it with me right now, but it's got a skull with a crown on it and a knife going up through. It's the coolest looking thing. And it says Obey God, Defy Tyrants, and it cites Acts 5:29, where the apostles refuse to stop preaching the gospel. And they essentially said to the leaders that like, we can't not do this. We have to obey God rather than man. So it's really cool. So here next week, Reformed Sage is releasing a flag with that image on it. And so imagine it looks like a pirate flag, but cooler. And it says, Obey God, Defy Tyrants. And I'm just thinking like, if it goes down, I'd like to be flying that flag with me and my homies. So I'm going to see if I can get myself one. And then I messaged Reformed Sage on Insta and I was like, hey, any chance you could make this into like morale patches? And he's like, working on it for this spring, man. And I'm like, that's my dude. Check out Reform Sage, by the way. Check out their Instagram. You'll see that patch. or that flag. It just looked really cool. Another quick thing. For Christmas, my wife got me another one of those Gear Aid knives. And about this time last year, I reviewed, I think I mentioned my Gear Aid knife. The nice thing about it, and I don't know if you guys can, well, you guys won't be able to see because most of you are listening, but I've got it on my chest rig. The sheath, which is a clicking sheath, actually will fit into MOLLE webbing. And so what I did is I weaved it just kind of right behind my mag pouch. And so I've got this extra knife right in here that I can pull out of here just like that. It's angled down, and because it's clicking, I can do that. So I can just pull it right out of there. It doesn't take up any extra space because it's really just slid behind my mag pouches. So I've got a full-size, full-tang knife right behind there. These knives are only like $25. And I recognize, like, you know, it's probably not as high grade as steels. You're going to get in a Benchmade knife or on something from Battle Horse Knives, which are all great. Highly recommend Battle Horse Knives, by the way. But for not that expensive, to be able to have a little extra knife in there on the back of the mag pouch, not take up any more space, I'm going to recommend them. So Gear Aid, it's their black Tonto blade knife. I've got the other one that's not the Tonto blade, and I like it a lot. I've got it on kind of my day hiking bag. Really, really cool. So check all that stuff out. Gear Aid, check out Reform Sage. Awesome stuff going on.
Cool.
Pete, you got anything else, brother?
That's it, man.
All right. Well, in that case, everybody, check out what's going on at Lake Erie Arms. As always, some really cool things happening. I was in there the other day looking at a Canik TP9 Elite. And we talked about this a little while ago. I should say it's a really cool gun. It feels good in your hand. That trigger is something magical. And so to be able to spend on that what you would spend on a standard Glock, but to have it kind of, I mean, it's more than a standard. You're probably spending like, I think it's like $600 or $700 for a full-on tricked out beast of a gun. Highly recommend it. So check out Lake Erie Arms, go to learms.net. And of course, you guys know some exciting special things are coming along the way with that too. And so we'll talk more about that later on, but that's all we have.
Cool. All right, guys, we'll talk to you all later. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the From Concealment Podcast with Pete Mitchell and Dan Sams. Be sure to tune in next week for more gun talk. Also, check out the From Concealment website for more shooting-related goodness at FromConcealment.com.